everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Lisa Alastuey, and on this channel, you will find a variety of inspirational and informational videos. So if that sounds good to you and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. My guest this week is bodybuilding legend, Shawn Ray. Shawn is a 13-time Mr. Olympia finalist with a record of finishing in the top 5 for 12 consecutive years. Shawn holds many other bodybuilding titles, including Teenage National Champion, Mr. California, and Arnold Classic Champion. He is also a NPC IFBB Pro League Promoter, media analyst, producer, spokesman, and editor-in-chief for Digital Muscle. Welcome, Shawn.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
I got my $600 Apple headphones on.
Fantastic. Like fantastic. And I love the palm trees behind you.
Yeah, we're waiting on some rain. We've had a lot of rain here in California, long overdue, but in about another 48 hours, it's going to be more rain coming our way. So I'm in the middle of my bike ride. I stopped to do this for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So one interesting thing that I learned about you at the Arnold Classic during a seminar is that you have attended every Arnold Classic for the last 35 years and every Olympia for the last 35 years. So you are not only a bodybuilder, but a true fan.
Yeah, no, my Olympia is 36 because I started, my first attendance was when I was in it in 1988. I believe that's 36 years ago. 1989 is when they started the Arnold Classic. I was actually signed up to compete in that Arnold Classic, but I got injured 5 weeks out, just strained a nerve in my neck, which was aggravating enough for me to buy into the idea that if I continue training for that show, I could make it worse. And then it could get pretty muddy. If you've never had a pinched nerve in your neck, it was at the base of my neck. And ironically, I was doing leg presses. I don't know what an aneurysm feels like, but it felt like something like a spring popped in the base of my neck. And then it went up into the bottom of my skull. And I felt a ringing, stinging, burning sensation. I didn't know what it was, but I know for like almost 2 weeks, I couldn't do this. It was just very stiff. So I only had 5 weeks to go for the show. I went to the doctor. They recommended that I don't do any physical activity, that I get some, back then they had electric muscle stimulation and massages. And eventually it just kind of came around, but it started coming around by the time the show actually happened. I showed up in Columbus, Ohio, showed the then acting vice president of the IFBB, Wayne D'Amelia, all of my medical records of all of my treatments. And he suspended me for a year because I didn't compete in the show. So this idiot was like holding me hostage that they advertised I was competing. I didn't compete. So he suspended me. I mean, literally, I was suspended for all of 1989. And I sat in that audience, fully knowing in my heart of hearts that I would be back. And I went on a year later to win the very first Ironman championships in 1990 and came back to Columbus, Ohio at the second annual Arnold Classic. And that was the year they were drug testing. And we all got notified somewhere following the 1989 in Rimini, Italy, the Olympia, that they were going to drug test. So we knew it was all coming. And as fate would have it, I would go in that show and win it, and then subsequently fail the drug test. And in failing the drug test, I had still qualified for the 1990 Mr. Olympia a week prior. So I had only one thing to do, and that was to pass the next one, which was going to be at the Mr. Olympia in the same calendar year, that September in Chicago, which I did very successfully. I moved up from 13th place in 1988 to 3rd place in the Mr. Olympia in 1990, getting a little bit of redemption for the failed drug test I had. And people have asked me, that would be devastating. And weren't you disappointed? $60,000. I don't know what $60,000 is by today's equivalency, but in that time, it could have been a very nice down payment on a house. And in my mind, I'm like, there goes the house I wanted to get. And so I needed to go back to Columbus, Ohio. And I immediately signed up for the 1991 Arnold Classic. And I went back, and again, I won with perfect scores. This time I kept the prize money. And I did go on to buy that house. And that was the launching of my career. I believe I was 24, 25 years old. But yeah, I do have that distinction from
Mhm.
1988 of never missing Olympia, and from 1989 of never missing an Arnold Classic. And I think that speaks volumes to my depth of passion and love for the sport. This isn't about money for me. I mean, I fell in love with bodybuilding as a teenager, and I've attended many shows I was not in or a part of as a fan to learn, become a student, to stay educated, to stay close to what it is I was trying to do with my body, to rub elbows with the other greats. I mean, I've met everyone in the sport. There was not a bodybuilder, once I realized what bodybuilding was, there's not a bodybuilder on the planet that I didn't meet that I wanted to meet. You know, sometimes you never meet your idols, right? You never meet the people that lay the foundation. I worked for Joe Weider for 18 years. I've been working alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger since I won the contest back in 1991. Um, I knew Robert Kennedy, the late Robert Kennedy, the publisher of Muscle Mag International. I worked for Steve Bleckman at Muscular Development for 10 years based out of New York. I worked with Bill Dobbins, Bill Reynolds, Peter McGough, the late Peter McGough over at Flex Magazine, John Balick, the owner of Ironman. So I've worked with everyone that helped lay the foundation of bodybuilding, and I've kind of learned from each of those different moving parts. I mean, from the
Mhm.
publishers to the photographers to the writers to the promoters, of which I am now, and to the Hall of Fame athletes. And I literally have laid hands on every Mr. Olympia trophy, with the exception of Arnold Schwarzenegger's 1980 Sandow Trophy and Franco Columbo's Sandow Trophy in 1981. They first started distributing those trophies in '77, and Frank Zane was the very first recipient. But besides those two individuals, I've literally touched and held the crown jewel of the Olympia world. I never got a chance to win one for myself, but being a fan, knowing those Olympia winners, and there's only 16 of them. Yeah, I mean, it's in my DNA, bodybuilding. Yeah.
So I know that you've had a long career. You know, you started competing in the 80s, all throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s, and retiring at 36. And so most people just retire, they go on and do other things, but you have stayed within bodybuilding. And in fact, I think you coined the term business of bodybuilding. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was something that I always had a sense of. I had a very acute awareness that I'm a product and I have to sell myself. I didn't have a manager. I never had an agent. I've never had a coach. I've gone through numerous training partners, which in reflection, in hindsight, I call them punching bags, because we just took turns beating each other up. Uh, but I was old school. I learned from my predecessors. I've had influences from different people that I thought were better than myself. John Brown introduced me like anyone else, like everything else. We all get introduced to something that we either become passionate about or something that we actually want to become or be. And John Brown, for me, was living a lifestyle at the time I was 17 that I thought, wow, this is glamorous. And little did I know, it was a lot of hard work, because for me, the only hard work I had to compare was cleaning toilets, washing windows, emptying trash cans, because my dad was a janitor and he owned his own business. So I worked my entire youth cleaning up after other people and helping my father. My dad would always say, we're trying to keep a roof over your head, keep food in your stomach. So kind of felt like at some point as a teenager, I was working for free. I didn't understand that, you know, my dad was teaching me discipline, humbleness, hard work. Because listen, on Saturdays after a Friday night football game, no one wants to get up and go, you know, empty trash cans and clean toilets. But it was part of my economy of life, because I started as a child and I followed behind my other brothers and sister and the neighbors that worked for my dad. It was a very lucrative business. My dad raised eight kids. Was a civil engineer, spent a few years in the Air Force, and you know, he was 37 years old when I was born. So in hindsight, now that he's passed over 12 years ago, I have a different reverence for that kind of work. And I thought I will do anything to get out of cleaning these toilets and emptying trash cans, because it cut into my lifestyle. I wanted to go to the beach. I wanted to be a kid. I wanted to have fun and I wanted to play. And I couldn't do that in the regime that my dad had our family structured. We were all going to work on the weekend. We were all going to work in the after hours, 11 o'clock to 5 in the morning. And it was just part of what we were doing, and it wasn't my passion. And when I started lifting weights and getting the shit kicked out of me by John Brown, you know, you start off and you feel like a failure because you're throwing up and you're hiding in the bathroom and you're trying to skip sets and you're trying to, you know, be invisible. And then suddenly, you know, I just wanted to fight back. I wanted to prove myself. I didn't want to feel like a quitter. I didn't want to feel like a loser. And I wanted to try to keep up with him because I saw the fruit of his labor. He had, you know, a couple of Mercedes Benz. He was talking in German because he was going to Europe. He was on all the magazine covers over in Europe because it was a NABA WABA Federation. He would come back from his tours with cash money, and I would hear him talking to fans and promoters, and I was watching him doing the business because I thought, what do you do? He said, I get on stage and I pose and I do these routines, and the girls go crazy and the promoters throw money at me, and I'm thinking, wow, you know, I know a celebrity, and so the closer I got to John, the more I studied what he did outside the gym. And I wanted that for me because he was eating, sleeping, and training. And that was his job. That was his business. I mean, he would eat 6 times a day. He'd sleep in the afternoon, and he'd go to the gym in the morning, go to the gym at night. And he had his days free, and he could pretty much travel wherever he wanted to go. And I thought, let me figure out how this works. And lo and behold, I was like a fish to water. I just dove in and I swam as trying to tread water until I actually started. I won my second contest, and then I won my third contest, and then I was teenage Orange County, teenage California, teenage LA, teenage national champion. And within 3 years graduating high school, I was a professional bodybuilder and American national champion. And I followed in the footsteps of these iconic names, which Lee Haney won the first nationals in 82. In 1983, my idol, Bob Paris. In 1984, it was another good friend and buddy of mine, Mike Christian. And in 1985, it was Phil Williams, who stayed at my house as a guest poser 2 weeks before he won his pro card. And I thought for myself, I want to be one of those guys. And bam, 1987 came, my first national championships. I flew across the country to New Jersey, and I won it on my first try. And I beat a lot of very good bodybuilders that went on to have some successful careers, including Matt Mendenhall, who was competing against Lee Haney in 1982, got second. So I arrived, and it was at that point that I knew this is a business. This is what I need to start getting paid. I need to figure out how that works and what it looks like. And I made pictures and posters and videos, and I contacted promoters via fax machine because we didn't have the internet, and phone calls all around the world studying how to reach these supplement stores and the gyms and the contest promoters. And my first year out in 1988, I had a world tour t-shirt that I made up, and it showed everywhere that I had booked myself. And my friends that I went to school with in college and my family, they saw my shirt and they just didn't understand it. Like, people are paying to see you, like you're getting paid to perform. And then the magazine started coming out, and they started seeing me on the covers of the magazines, and signed a contract with Joe Weider. It was paltry. It was $1,000 a month, but it got me my first apartment, covered my first car note. And I started really marketing myself as a product. And I didn't have any help or guidance with that. I just kind of studied what people weren't doing, and I tried to be a trailblazer, and it's worked. It's the only thing I know. It's the only thing that I do.
So do you think you're from California, you've grown up around the entertainment business in Hollywood, and you kind of understand that because you were from there versus saying if you were born in Oklahoma. So do you think that somewhat exposure was an advantage to seeing it as a business and parlaying it into, like you said, the magazines? And I even saw a YouTube video of you in spandex from the 90s or 80s. You were doing a TV show about how to lift weights.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to land a role on the Flex magazine workout with my partner Boyer Coe back in the early 90s. It lasted 3 years, and we would film 4 episodes a day for like 4 weeks, and they'd play it for a whole season. You'd see it at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. It helped put me on the map. But by the time that show had come out, I'd already been third in the Mr. Olympia 3 times. So I had a name when the Arnold Classic. But listen, if you're trying to be an actor and you're living in Alabama, you're only going to be as good as the company you keep. You've got to go where the talent is. And sometimes you're going to have to start at the bottom. For bodybuilding, Gold's Gym is the Mecca. Joe Weider's offices is, 45 minutes away. When you go into Gold's Gym back when I was there, literally half the gym lived from somewhere else. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger came from Austria at 19 years old. Why? Because Austria is not the bodybuilding capital of the world. And he wanted to compete and train around and be around the very best in the world that were trying to accomplish the things he had in mind. I also was making that pilgrimage at 17 and 18 to Gold's Gym so I can see the finish line. And I think when you see the talent and you can see the finish line and what the body of work that you're putting in could actually lead to, it keeps you focused on that path. So like Hollywood, like New York, for the actors and the models and even the singers, it seemed like it was Hollywood or New York for the entertainment industry. I didn't really care too much about being an entertainer. I was concerned about being the best bodybuilder in the world. And there were a few examples that I thought I compared with. Chris Dickerson was 43. He was Mr. Olympia in 1982. He was 5'5" and maybe 180 pounds on a good day. Samir Banu, when I started bodybuilding in 83, was 5'6" and 180 pounds. And this is a guy I stood shoulder to shoulder with. I could see that in my economy of maybe winning the Olympia. Franco Colombo was even smaller, and he had 2 Olympia titles. And the people that were pushing during my era, Muhammad McAway had been second place twice to Lee Haney in 1983 and 84. And then you had Lee Labrada in 1985 come into the business, and he was a 2-time Olympia runner-up in 1988, 1989, and 1990. And I was there with him. So I was in good company. I knew that this is something that I could do, but for me to be the best, I needed to be where the best were. And they were all in Venice Beach. They were all trained. Now, I think we've come to a state of bodybuilding where you can do it from home. You don't even have to be in a big gym. But at the time, we all gathered, and there was a camaraderie, and there was a fellowship that I loved and that I appreciated by making the pilgrimage to Gold's Gym. But it's a very independently contracted business. You are what you do. You are what you work for. You get what you go after. This is not a sport where, hey, I've got the best body, so bring me my opportunities. Your opportunities are endless, but those that get up and seek those opportunities are the ones that sometimes have the staying power. And I'm not alone. There's some guys in this business still doing the business of bodybuilding successfully on different levels and in different areas, like Rich Gaspari and Lee Labrada and Bob Chick and Flex Wheeler. There's some guys that are well into their retirement that are still living and milking their careers as a result of what they accomplished on stage. I'm a little bit more diversified because I've always been a spokesman. I've always been an ambassador. I've always been a product endorser. I have the gift of gab, so I've always been a commentator and I've always been a master of ceremonies. I've emceed shows as far away as China and Japan and Romania, Switzerland. So that's reading names off a paper, but it shows you my passion that even reading names off a piece of paper, standing there looking at these other athletes, it intrigues me. It excites me to be in the company of great athletes. So I do a little bit of everything. I work for one of the #1 supplement companies in the world called Mutant, and they're in over 100 countries. I work for the second coming of Joe Weider in the form of Jake Wood, who bought the Olympia and revitalized and brought back women's bodybuilding. And he seems to be giving a lot of people opportunities to live out their dreams. And I certainly am one of them. I'm a consultant for the Mr. Olympia. So I grabbed the idea and the concept of the marketing, the production, and the promotion of the sport from the source. Joe and Ben Weider. Joe and Ben Weider were people that I could listen to for hours, and I absorbed it all. I talked to the promoters of the sport. I watched Arnold Schwarzenegger build that contest from 20 athletes to however many invitees that he has, and over 200,000 fans come on that go to Columbus. And so being a part of the Olympia, being a part of the Arnold, it's helped me promote the Shawn Ray Classic from California, 6 hours across the Pacific Ocean, 3 pro divisions, the biggest show in Hawaii for the past 6 years running, giving other opportunities to athletes coming up that are just like me on the island of paradise once a year out in November.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that because that is an area where you have branched out in your business of bodybuilding. So let me take you back to what gave you the impetus to start it?
Yeah, I was a football player. I played football from 8 years old to 18 when I graduated as a senior. Well-documented story, like a lot of athletes, like a lot of bodybuilders. I got hurt. Lee Haney got hurt playing football and he was bodybuilding. John Brown was a football player. He got hurt and he came into bodybuilding. So I was nursing a knee injury my senior year of watching our playoff hopes disappear. And so I never got to play in my last game at high school, knowing it was my last game, right? My career ended on crutches in a cast with a sprained knee, no ligament tear, but my knee was sprained, and I watched the season end. And that was in November of 1983. In June of 84, I was invited to play in an all-star football game, and I had to choose preparing to play in that football game as a running back so I can be seen by college scouts and go to the next level, or do the teenage national championships. And I went to the teen national championships in 83, held here in Los Angeles at the Grand Hotel. And I saw Franco Santarillo, a 17-year-old, win that show. And that was the year I started bodybuilding. And I said, I want to do the teen national championship. So I started preparing in January when I wore the brace, the cast. I wore it for 1 week and I cut it off. I was supposed to wear it for 5, but I wanted to start training and rehabbing my knee. And by the time June came around, I was fully committed to compete in the teen nationals. And I flew to Detroit, Michigan at 18 years old as a high school senior, graduated. My graduation was in June. I got second place in that contest to Franco Santarillo, who came back to defend his title and retain his title. And getting second place was a blessing and a curse. But second place sucks. So we know what the taste of defeat feels like. Nobody wants to be second. But at 18 years old, I figured I'm going to come back at 19 and win it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was highly motivated to come back. And in the interim, I came back and I won the Teen Orange County in my hometown at the convention center in front of all of my fit friends and football players and coaches. They all came out to see me. And I won that show. Albert Beckles was the guest poser. Rachel McClish was the guest poser, and Beth Francis. And those are huge icons in the sport of bodybuilding. Albert was second in 1985 in Olympia. So I went to the teen nationals in Atlanta, Georgia, and I won the light heavy and the overall. And at 19 years old, I was the teen national champion, just like Lee Haney was before me. And I knew then that I was on my way. This is something that, lit the fuse, and then it never stopped burning.
It's still burning.
My whole career.
Yes. So I have a question about the athlete's rep and what their role is, and what for the business of bodybuilding could be improved upon for the athlete's rep. And also, is it over the IFBB or Mr. Olympia? Is there more than one? Tell me a little bit about the athlete's rep.
So I ran for athlete's rep because there was no representation of the athletes. I was very vocal throughout my career about things that were going to be beneficial to the athletes. And some people that were in the establishment were painting me as a crybaby, bitching and moaning. And we had a very contentious 2001 Mr. Olympia press conference where I was very vocal about the rotation of judges, about the lack of prize money for all the Olympians, about the idea that we all are being marketed to sell the Olympia, but only a handful of us are being paid to participate in Olympia. And it lit a match that some athletes understood what I was saying. The majority of the fans knew what I was saying, but the establishment wasn't ready for that branch to be developed. So I retired after 2001 because I'd gone as far as I could, and Ronnie Coleman was, crushing everyone's dreams. And I realized that, it was probably never going to happen for me. And now's the time to move on. I'm injury free. I'm happy. And there's got to be another chapter to my life. And while I was in retirement, 2003 or 2, I decided I wanted to be the athlete's rep. I had to go back and deal with the vice president, Wayne DeMiglia, who didn't want any representation from the athletes. It was a dictatorship. The Weeders kind of stood back and let Wayne promote the sport of bodybuilding the way he wanted to. And it was his way or the highway. And I bucked the system. And I got Joe's blessing. And Wayne DeMiglia said, I have to get the blessing of the athletes. I need the majority of the athletes to vote me in, to nominate me, to represent them at the table, to present ideas that were going to be to the betterment of the athletes and on behalf of the athletes. Well, while I'm doing that, getting all the votes from the people that wanted representation, I was being undermined by Wayne and his henchmen that this would be a bad thing. You don't want Shawn Ray talking on your behalf. You don't need representation. So several athletes then started a campaign that they didn't want me. They wanted a body. They wanted an athlete body, like more than one athlete. First of all, we didn't have any representation, but now the powers that be were telling people that you want to have more than one person represent you. You definitely don't want Shawn Ray to represent you. I think I was too smart for my own good back then. But there were some athletes that bought into it. They didn't want to rock the boat. And so they started a campaign to try to keep me from becoming the athlete's rep. I got the signatures. I became the athlete's rep. And then I got stonewalled. They're having meetings without me present. They would switch the time of a meeting and I would show up and they'd say, oh, we already had the meeting. You missed the, this was pre-cell phone era. You didn't get the memo. So I saw it was a cat and mouse game. And I thought, some of these athletes don't appreciate what it is I'm trying to do. And I'm retired. If they don't care about the lack of rotation of judges, the accountability of the scoring, the transparency of who's judging year after year after year, the lack of prize money for 10th and below, if they're not interested, I've got other things to do. And I was starting to feel the empty nest of having all the trappings of success, but not having a family, not having a soulmate, not having someone to go through life with. And I decided, screw it. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids. And I'm going to go to the next chapter of my life. And I thought that was my best interest and my best decision I could make. Lo and behold, the federation was being sold. The Weeders were selling the Olympia and the magazines to AMI. And in that transference of power, Jim Mannion came in to take over the IFBB Pro League and start that. Wayne DeMilia was unceremoniously kicked out of his position for a lot of wrongdoings. And then Bob Ciccarello was anointed by Jim as the guy that could be the voice of the athletes. And Bob has been there ever since. It wasn't a nomination. It wasn't a voting process. There was no democracy in it. Jim said, Bob, you're going to be the athlete's rep. I want to hear from you what the athletes need from time to time. So it's not a paid position. It's a ceremonial position. Mm-hmm. Bob's very good at listening to the athletes. Bob's very good at presenting Jim with ideas. He's very communicative. And then there's also forces that don't like Bob. I left the Weeder Federation, Flex Magazine, and Muscle and Fitness. When they sold, I switched over to Muscular Development with Steve Blackman, and the year prior with Robert Kennedy at Muscle Mag. So I was kind of removed from that whole establishment, and Bob was inserted in there. And he's done an okay job. I mean, there's people that don't like some of his opinions, but Bob's an open book. Some athletes have come to him, expressed some concerns. He's expressed them and parlayed them onto the federation. Some things have been changed and some things have been stonewalled. But what we have right now with Bob being the athlete's rep is there's some people, anybody can have a podcast, anybody can have a microphone. There's some haters out there that try to judge Bob off of being a company man. Bob doesn't get paid by the federation. They don't like the language Bob uses. They don't like the idea that Bob's been there for a long time, and they want him gone. We're living in an age of cancel culture, but Bob's done absolutely nothing wrong. But some of these armchair quarterbacks that don't even go to bodybuilding show, they have opinions on how things should be run. They complain about the posing round. They complain about the lighting. They complain about all these things, and none of them have put anything in writing formally or even given back or even attend shows. So I give it my hats off to Bob, because Bob goes to the shows. Mm-hmm. He knows the athletes. He knows the promoters. He knows the judges. The federation is listening. And in essence, right now, things that I'm sitting here as a spectator, things are relatively good. Can there be some changes to help the athletes? 100%. Am I interested in implementing them? No. I'm a fan. I'm a spectator. I'll let Bob do that.
Yeah, it brings me to my next question, since we're talking about the business of bodybuilding, you can't forget that there's politics that come into play with this. And with the YouTube and all the different like bodybuilding channels, there's this whole subculture and niche and drama that happens online, people giving their opinions, people doing cancel culture and so forth. But I find it quite interesting because I'm learning more about the bodybuilding world. But can you touch on the business of bodybuilding and how the politics are also huge in it play?
Yeah. I mean, listen, this is a sport of subjective opinion. You can't come in here with thin skin. I have been commentating, analyzing, and hosting bodybuilding shows since the early 90s, standing behind a microphone, sitting behind a TV monitor, sitting in front of a computer, standing on stage with a microphone in my hand, analyzing the physiques, breaking down the physiques, critiquing the physiques, criticizing the physiques. And now everyone has a voice, because before you just had to listen to the commentators, and it is what it is. You draw your own conclusion. Now you don't have to listen to the commentator. Some people will live stream an event, turn the volume down on the commentators, and they'll insert their own opinions. Yeah. Free speech, free enterprise. And at the end of the day, you're going to have cancel culture. They're not going to like what you say. They're not going to like what they hear. And you even have the actual athletes coming after announcers, coming after the commentators. If you criticize them too harshly, you tell them they're not good enough, they're not ready for prime time, their calves are small, their stomachs are bloated, their tan is off, their posing sucks. We're living in an age where you have to be very selective about your wording because everyone has a voice. And we have all of these different communities out there. Feelings count. Feelings are important. Watch what you say. It's very inclusive now, but it's still a sport of subjective opinion, and no one's opinion is more important than the other. It depends on how big the platform is. So the bigger the platform, the more cautious you have to be about what you say. The more aware we now have to be of feelings. The adjectives that we use to describe a distended stomach cannot sound like he's a fat bloated mess. You can't say that. You cannot say, wow. We can't say that he doesn't deserve to be here. Simply because there are shows that people use to qualify to get there. So if you go and compete in the show, there's 4 pros in the show, 3 of them suck and you're the winner, you got your ticket to the Olympia. Now you're at the Olympia, you're dead last, your tan sucks, your posing sucks, your conditioning is horrible, and you don't belong on that stage. As a commentator, if you say that, their crew, their followers, their family, their friends will all come for your head. So commentators now are very PC. I don't want to say that they're not truthful, but everybody's a champion. Everyone's a winner. Everyone deserves to be there. Everyone's great. It's very inclusive sport. So if it's all that inclusive and they actually deserve to be there, we have to be mindful. I don't particularly care for the state of commentating today, especially after you've been doing it for 30 years. I'm at a point in my life now where the critiquing is not a priority, because I can feel a little bit more of the appreciation for what I'm looking at rather than the selective wording I have to use based on the audience watching. And it's in the mind of every commentator nowadays. Some people are chomping at the bit to have a seat at the microphone to be able to give their opinion on a big platform. But when I watch that and I listen to some of those opinions, they're all very inclusive. They're all very PC. None of them give the athletes an opportunity to learn what's wrong with them or what they need to improve. It's all very PC because you're mindful of the family, the girlfriend, the social media following, the over-analysis of the Monday morning quarterback when it's all said and done. So that's not for me. Not when you're a straight shooter. Not when you come from a place of black and white and you call it like you see it. And so if I have to feel censored with my opinions, I'd rather keep my opinions to myself, because I come from the old school cloth of speaking my mind and telling the truth, and the truth will set you free. So now social media has moved into a place where you've got to be aware of your pronouns.
Community strikes.
Yes. And cancel culture and feelings and all of those things. And that's not for somebody like me.
Yeah, you've gotten in trouble a few times, and controversial I've seen online. There's a lot of I would say some friendly conflict and maybe not so friendly conflict that people get exposed to, and then they have to decide what is truth and real. But the online world is quite interesting. I have to admit, I enjoy your comedy with Lee Priest. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. It's comedy gold for bodybuilding.
Listen, this is a sport where I've grown old with these guys. We met, most of these guys that I'm actually friendly or cordial with, I met coming out of my teen years. Flex, Kevin, Chris, Dorian. We've grown old together. We're all in our 50s. So we met in our early 20s. Some of us met as teenagers. And like family, we fight. And we fight hard. We were all fighting for the same real estate. And some of the critique hurts feelings. And then as you get older, wisdom comes in and you realize, we were in the heat of battle. We were battling for thousands of dollars. We were all battling for the same trophies. We were territorial. We didn't have the internet to run to complain. And we didn't use our space in magazines to rip on each other. But, like family, we fight, and words hurt and feelings count. And I've pissed off Flex. I've fought with Chris, and I've had my opinions about Kevin Levrone, and we're in our 50s, man. We all kind of respect each other, what we've accomplished, because there's very few people that can do what we did and come out with the lifestyle that we all live. But today, you hurt those feelings of a 20-something-year-old, a 30-something-year-old bodybuilder who is trying to be the best there and give the best that they can. You hurt their feelings. You hurt the feelings of all of their followers. So yeah, we're still all kind of adjusting to how quickly the snapback, clapback culture
social
is.
media is just,
and it's, listen, I get my kicks off of social media. A lot of people make a good living off of social media. Look, Bumstead's got like 12 million followers, Chris Bumstead.
Yep.
There are guys that are new to the game that are 2 or 3 years in that have millions of followers, whereas comparatively speaking, someone like Lee Haney is struggling to get 200,000 followers, right? Lee Haney's one of the most decorated bodybuilders and recognizable faces of all time, but his engagement's low because the kids today don't know him. And some people are building their social media off of gimmick. You see guys with a bunch of synthol or taking steroids online and giving crazy protocols online. And these are the catchy guys that some of our youth are following. People, they find their niche online and they build their following that way. It's not bodybuilding. It's not what I'm in love with. I mean, we pick and choose who we want to follow, who we want to listen to. And I'm an acquired taste. Listen, when you deal with someone that has no filter, I'm kind of like Don Rickles, right? Like Don Rickles will say everything that no one wants to say, but we all want to hear it. And some people can't. It's an acquired taste. And I know I'm acquired taste, but the one thing I do know is that I come from a good place. My commentary is designed to help point out what is obvious for the athletes to fix or to benefit themselves from. I don't always pick the right words or have the right timing, and I don't speak to make friends, right? Like I just kind of tell it like it is. A lot of my people in my industry, they call me the truth. And when you tell the truth, you're going to hurt feelings. And I get it. I got very thick skin. I was criticized. I was on that stage in my briefs, and I've been told when I was off, and I heard some things about myself I didn't like. And at the end of the day, it's a physique contest. It's not a personality contest. My friends I grew up with, I still live 20 miles from where I grew up. My friends, my best man at my wedding was the kid I met when I was in preschool. I have a house party. You're lucky if there's 1 or 2 bodybuilders there. So I'm not trying to please people. People that know me, love me, and those are the people I like to be around. And in social media world, the world of fantasy where anybody can be whatever they want with filters and quotes and artificial intelligence, it's not real. And I know it's not real. My daughter's 17 years old with 1.7 million followers, right? She hasn't lived, but I had a bodybuilding career that was just as long as her life, and she's got 1.7 million people following her career. We follow and we are attracted to what we like, and I don't try to win people over. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't.
Yes. And I do admire that about you. You definitely shoot straight from the hip, but you also know a lot about bodybuilding. You have a lot of knowledge about the history, a lot of knowledge about the sports, the winners, the trivia. So you definitely have a place, and your voice should be heard. Nobody should be silenced. I think every opinion does matter.
Yeah, and I come from that place. Listen, I hear things from other bodybuilders and other commentators that I don't necessarily like, or even that I don't necessarily agree with. And I've kind of gotten to a place where, they got a right to say what they want to say. I don't have to like it. I really don't have to have an opinion on it. But
right. And you can turn it off. You don't
turn it off.
Yeah. You don't have to respond. Yeah.
That's where we're at. And I'm good. I mean, I'm good with the criticism, and I'm also thankful for the praise.
Yeah. I mean, the criticism part, if it's constructive and it's going to make you better, and it's, it's the intent and understanding behind it that people, maybe have to reevaluate and look at if they're being 100%. Criticized. Yeah. So let me ask you about the future of the business of bodybuilding and how it will evolve. How do you see bodybuilding in the next, 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah. I mean, listen, more and more people are in the weight room and watching their macros and counting their calories and hiring coaches and renewing their gym memberships than ever before, because it's so inclusive of everything, right? Like we have a division for everybody. I mean, you know, they brought in slap fighting. I wouldn't call it a sport, but you know, whoever slaps the hardest gets a trophy. You know, you see, you turn on ESPN and you're seeing literally tiddlywinks. Like there's everybody's competing for something. The CrossFit, the strong man, the strong woman. We have 11 pro divisions, I believe, at the Mr. Olympia, inclusive of the wheelchair division and the wellness division. We brought back the Masters Olympia after all those years. Mind you, I was there the first year they held that in Atlanta, Georgia, 1994. I was getting second to Dorian Yates. Robbie Robinson won the first Masters Olympia championships, and it gave birth to a lot of bodybuilders' extended careers. It disappeared, and now Jake Wood has decided to bring it back, not just for the men bodybuilders, but for literally every division. And if you win, you get a free trip, or I don't know, a free trip, but you get a ticket to the Olympia, the actual Open Olympia. If you are a Masters Olympia winner this year in Romania, you get to compete in the Mr. Olympia in November in Orlando. So that's a pretty big deal, because you're talking physique, you're talking figure, you're talking wellness, you're talking all the divisions are going to be represented. And on top of that, you start looking around and you see the other events that, you know, these obstacle courses, they're bringing back those. I don't know what the age is, but it's over in England, where they wear the body armor and they have swords and they're hitting each other, whatever the heck that stuff is. They have something for everyone. People are living longer, making smarter choices with their food, joining gyms at record paces, and seeking help for their health and longevity. These TRT
so you see
companies are popping up.
The sport growing in fans, growing in divisions.
Well, I don't see it growing. The numbers bear that out. That's factual. Now, how that relates to bodybuilding as an individual sport, I'm not so sure everybody wants to jump on the bodybuilding, because it's the hardest thing you can do. Out of all of the disciplines, open bodybuilding is the hardest. And I said 6 years ago that with the inclusion of classic physique, that's going to be the replacement of bodybuilding. Because one, you don't have to get so big and freaky and drug induced. And two, a lot more people look at it as more of a participatory sport. I look at it as what I fell in love with. These guys are artists. These guys are keeping things in a certain level instead of just being the biggest, freakiest thing. They're working on their tight waist. They're working on their detail. They're working on their presentation and their color of their skin. And they realize that we're watching them. Whereas a lot of bodybuilders just give me more calories and give me more drugs and let's just be the biggest thing. And I don't like the freak show. And I thought that classic physique is going to be the demise of professional bodybuilding as we know it. And if we're not careful, it could potentially become that. Open men's bodybuilding can disappear. If I had an open men's bodybuilding show in Hawaii, I would be hard pressed to have a full lineup 2 weeks after the Mr. Olympia, whereas I know I'm going to have a massive lineup with classic physique. Because the men bodybuilder are of the opinion they can only do it once a year. They can only hit their peak once a year. Their health is more important. And so we're finding bodybuilders that, you know, only compete one time a year. I did because I was doing other things. I didn't have the time to compete. Not to mention, I only wanted to be Mr. Olympia. I didn't want to be Mr. New York and Mr. all these things. I wanted to be Mr. Olympia. So that was why I competed so many times in the Olympia and with such frequency. But back in the day, Flex Wheeler, Vince Taylor, Kevin Levrone, Chris Cormier, these guys competed in 20 shows a year. And now you find a bodybuilder hard-pressed doing 2 shows a year. And the argument is that their health comes first. So they're more concerned about their health than they are about winning awards, which is why we very rarely see open bodybuilders competing in multiple shows, which is why I don't have open bodybuilding. And it's a tragedy, because if these athletes could commit to competing, I would add it to my platform. I mean, Jim Mannion in Pittsburgh doesn't even have open bodybuilding. He has guest posers, a handful. So that tells you more about the depth of bodybuilders wanting to compete with more frequency, and they just don't have it. That's why I'm bringing classic physique to Hawaii, because these guys don't have to go to too many extremes. And I have a very good feeling based on my last show that I did in Hawaii with classic physique that this year's show will be bigger than ever. 2 weeks following the Olympia.
Yes. So so we had Haney won 8 times, Ronnie won 8 times, Phil Heath won 7 times. What is the likelihood of having another bodybuilder winning that many times in a row? Are those days gone?
Yeah, they're gone. Like the 8-track, like the cassette player, like the payphone, they're gone. We saw them. It's over. You're not going to see someone that dominant ever again. Now, I hate to say never again, and that records are made to be broken, and that we said the same
Sure.
thing about Lee Haney. No one would beat Lee Haney's record, and then along comes Ronnie Coleman, and of course, he did the unthinkable, and he tied it. You know, records are made to be broken. You know, Dexter Jackson is not a bodybuilder when he first turned pro and came on the scene back in '95 that I would have thought would have a 3-decade-long bodybuilding career and win the Olympia and the Arnold and all of the things. But he did that, right? He broke Flex Wheeler's record at the Arnold of 4. He won 5 Arnold Classic titles. So as far reached as it is, we're not supposed to ever say never, but I'm going to say never. We're never going to see it again.
Okay. So let me ask you another question about the future of bodybuilding. You know, we've seen transgenders in other sports like swimming, wrestling, track. Is that something that's being discussed in the bodybuilding world of a possible transgender or transgender division?
No, it's not being discussed, and I think it's a very fine line. I know that was it Florida? Someone banned transgenders from, was it the Olympics? One of these major federations banned the trans. Listen, these guys come out of the starting blocks and they blow the girls away, and it's a guy. That's not something that our sport has embraced. I haven't seen it. I haven't heard complaints about it. So it's such a new topic, right? Transgender, such a new topic that I don't think we're at that point yet where we have enough participatory athletes that would actually represent that branch of individuals to where it's topical.
Okay. I was just wondering because they keep adding.
Listen, like anything else, numbers count. So back when Rosa Parks sat in the front and started the bus boycott movement, it led to, and you can sit anywhere you want to on the bus. Someone has to break the glass ceiling. Our sport is not there where someone's challenged the establishment, someone's made a stink, so when that happens, we have to deal with it as it comes. It is a very, very inclusive sport of religion. It's a very inclusive sport of politics. We welcome everyone. That is an area, a frontier that we have yet to confront.
Yeah. And I saw at the Arnold Classic, you know, that you have the wheelchair division for men, but they didn't have one for women. They had the one lady that came on stage, but there's not I don't know, it's not as promoted, or there's not a lot of women in wheelchair bodybuilding of interest. Maybe that'll happen more so in the future.
Well, let me tell you, I mean, we are living in a world where everyone wants a seat at the table. Bodybuilding, when it started, was not something that was promoted for the women because the women thought it was too masculine. They were getting blowback from the women's liberation movement, not from the men. And we know that, for example, bodybuilding didn't start in '65, but the Mr. Olympia did. It took 2 brothers to create this contest, and they created it for men and strong men in 1965. That gave birth to the Mr. Olympia. Larry Scott won that. Women were not included on the Olympia level until 1979, 1980, when Kiki Ioma, Rachel McCliss, Lisa Lyon, they all decided they wanted to do this, and it was added to the Olympia platform. It was eliminated after several decades. I guess we had the Women's Olympia in the 80s, through the 90s, in 2000. It got canceled, not because women weren't bodybuilding, but because companies weren't sponsoring it. If you don't have the money to give it, you cannot have it. People don't do this business to lose money. Okay. So women came into the Olympics and into basketball, professional soccer. And of course, they have a right to have a voice. And until we hear the voice of the women in wheelchair and we have enough athletes to promote that division, it's not incumbent upon a promoter to just openly add it and say, hey, anybody with a wheelchair can come and compete, both male and female. You have to have advocacy. No one's told a female in a wheelchair, no, you can't. So it's going to take a woman in a wheelchair to say, yes, I can. And then it's going to be incumbent upon someone to start some advocacy to gather these ladies to form a coalition to where you can actually put on a contest. You can't have a contest with one woman in a wheelchair.
Right.
So when we say that our sport's very inclusive, it's very inclusive, but we have more men in wheelchair that want to display their musculature and their physical challenges and disabilities than we do have women. And until we hear from those women, it's not incumbent upon a promoter to actually add it to their roster. And it takes money to do certain things, and you have to have representation.
Yes, definitely. So you mentioned women's bodybuilding, which I was going to ask you about the future of that. Where, you know, because it did go away for a while. Now it's back. And with social media, women have a lot more exposure. They're a brand, they get their supplements, and they have a lot of following. And so would you say that women's divisions have made a leap from what they were, you know, just a decade ago?
Oh, 100%. Without the women, heck, our sport might be dead in the water. I mean, yeah, the resurgence of women's bodybuilding is solely from one person, and that's Jake Wood. You got to give credit where credit is due. He bought the Mr. Olympia. When the Mr. Olympia canceled the women bodybuilding and the Arnold Classic canceled women's bodybuilding, Jake, with his Wings of Strength Federation, continued to promote and resurrect that sport. He hired former Olympians like Linda Murray, brought in Alina Popa, and it's a women's sport run by women. And they kept it alive until he purchased the Olympia platform. And he said, I'm putting this back. I'm adding this back, and it has thrived. We have 3-time Ms. Olympia, Andrea Shaw, who works for the same supplement company I do, and Mutant. She is undeniably the Linda Murray of women's bodybuilding right now. She's Iris Kyle 2.0. I don't want to say she's undefeatable, but right now she's undefeatable. I fully expect her to win her 4th Olympia title. And Jake has given these women a platform and an opportunity to continue what they love. And it's just, you know, you added women's wellness and women's bikini, women's fitness. All of those things are alive and well because the ladies are competing in super numbers. My numbers in Hawaii are more women than there are men.
Wow.
Men's bodybuilding is down and women's divisions are all up. So women right now are the salvation of our sport as we know it as a promoter. And if you go to your next show, take a look at how many women are competing in the bikini and the figure divisions. Are just crazy. Women's bodybuilding, not so much. They got to work harder on the farm club. They got to get more amateurs participating. But the women's Olympia is a full lineup every year. And I think Jake Wood has to get the credit where that goes.
Okay. So let me ask you a question, because you mentioned the future is the classic physique. It's kind of how you see it with a crystal ball. And I've heard other people talk about, you know, maybe doing away with the classic physique, doing away with the 212 and just making it all open. What do you think about that? Like, that was your time, right?
Well, I can tell you, Chris Bumstead is 4-time Mr. Olympia in the classic physique. If you throw him in the Mr. Olympia lineup, he's Mr. Olympia too. Chris knows for the past 3 years, I've been telling him to go open. He's playing it safe. He likes his division. He said he wants to be 7-time classic physique champion. So I'm not going to crap all over what his goal is and what his dream is. He has arguably been, for me, the best physique. Forget bodybuilding. He's the best physique in the industry for the past 3 years running, in my opinion. And mind you, I go to every show. I'm at every contest. I've seen every physique. So when I say that, I put him above Big Ramy. I put him above Hadi Chupan. I put him up over the 2nd place finalist, Derek Lunsford. I have him beating Brandon Curry. So I'm talking about 4 Olympians, Ramy, Brandon, Hadi, well, 3 Olympians, and Derek Lunsford, who was 2nd. I have him better than all of those guys at this point in his career and even 3 years ago. So when you say do away with it, it's semantics. Chris Bumstead is the best physique on the planet. He's just not getting paid for it because the Mr. Olympia is a $400,000 payday. Classic physique is a $50,000 payday. But at the end of the day, if you take the classic physique, men's physique, Mr. Olympia, and 212 and have a pose down, Chris Bumstead wins, in my opinion, all day, every day. So I'm looking at the best physique on the planet. I've told him that. He doesn't want to hear it. We all are entitled to what we like. Hadi Chupan is a deserving champion. Big Ramy when he won, Brandon Curry. But Chris Bumstead is Mr. Olympia. He can't say that. He has to say classic Olympia. I wouldn't put myself in a box. Chris has nothing to prove on the classic physique level. He has nothing to prove.
Right.
He wins the Mr. Olympia. He wins the Mr. Olympia. He's immortalized. We know all of it. we're gonna classic physique is more talented. There's
Mhm.
more challenges there. It's more competitive.
Mhm.
The athletes are closer, and the quality for me is better. But that's what brought me into the sport, is that type of look.
Mhm.
Men's bodybuilding is not something that gets me out of bed. Classic, I'm drawn to. That's why I like Chris
Mhm.
Bumstead so much.
Yes, yes. I remember in an interview you said you're a physique artist. Like that's how you
100%.
see. Yeah.
And that's what the classic physique division is. So I may be a little bit biased, but I can
Mhm.
tell you, in my over 40 years in the industry, I know what I'm looking at.
Mhm.
And Chris Bumstead is the best physique on the planet.
Yeah, yeah. He was one of the people that really popped up online also that I was like, who is this guy? He really brought attention to people who maybe not be fans of the sport or know much about the sport. He has become a representation to bring, a lot of new fans to the sport.
Well, let me tell you, if you're judging the physique, Chris will win. But
Mhm.
I can't convince him of that. That window is closing. He's getting older, injuries are happening, and you hit your peak, and sometimes it's hard to sustain. He's a young guy, but a lot has gone into the last 5 years of his training, and it's
Yeah.
not been injury free.
Mhm.
And I hope he doesn't wait to the end of his career to try to make that jump, because by the time he makes it a little bit later, it could be too late, and then
Yeah.
he doesn't have a shot at that.
Yeah, I went to the seminar at the Olympia on Sunday, and the classic physiques prize money is only like 50 or 60,000 compared to the open, which is 400,000. And he said on stage, it's not about the money and
Of
so
course.
on. But you also have $1 million supplement company, so you can say it's not about the money.
Well, let me tell you something. When he's my age, he'll look back and realize how much money he could use at my age, because this is a business. Okay.
Yes.
We put our lives on the line. I've seen bodybuilders die pursuing the title. So if I'm going to put my life on the line, and by that, I mean, my career could be over when I'm squatting, I tear a muscle. My career could be over while I'm benching, I tear my pec. My career could be over, I have a heart attack. If I'm going to put my life on the line, I want to make sure I'm getting the maximum out of it, and I'm competing for the max prize. So I have family. I can't think about myself and my own bank account. There's something to be said for being rewarded, and having the fruit of your labor being paid forward. He may think he has enough money to live today, but if he gets married and has a kid, if his parents get old, sick, death in the family, you have to become responsible for a sibling or a cousin or a nephew. Money is what's required
Mhm.
to be able to contribute. I don't think we ever have enough money as athletes, because our athletic careers are so short. And when it's over, you start looking back at the things you coulda, woulda, shoulda done. And
Mhm.
wisdom tells us in hindsight what some of those decisions to make our lives better could have been. So I'm not going to tell him how to live or what to do, but he's putting his life on the line like everyone else competing. Hadi Chupin won $400,000 in comparison to the $50,000 that
Was 212
Chris won.
and also the
No,
212 division.
well, the 212 gets 50,000 also.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that if you are competing and you have the mindset that this is for the best physique on the planet, the open is the smart choice for me. But
Mhm.
it's only because I'm 57 years old. I survived the war injury free, and I'm sitting on the sidelines Monday morning quarterbacking. If I would be 29 years old again and I have 4 Olympia titles under my belt in classic, in my economy, I would be like, there's nowhere to go in this division but down. The percentages of injury is higher because I'm older.
Mhm.
And the challenge for me to go to the next frontier, to beat a guy that's 5'6", 5'7", 240 pounds. Chris is 6'1", and he's 240 pounds. If
Mhm.
he doesn't have to be bigger, he doesn't have to be anything. He just has to bring that package and put it next to that bodybuilder. You'll see the differences in circumference and in the way the
Aesthetics.
body ebbs, the aesthetics and the ebb and the flow and the posing. And you'll see that when you put those two together, you got to choose this muscle, this big meaty muscle, or this elegant artistic physique. And the majority of the people watching, I think, are going to be drawn to Chris.
Mhm.
Hadi wouldn't lose because he's not good enough. Hadi would lose because genetically Chris is superior,
Mhm.
and aesthetically on the eye more marketable. And it's going to make the judges have to make a decision that I don't think would be a tough decision, but it would elevate the sport of bodybuilding, because I just believe that the majority of the people are going to go, I could look like that. I could be that way. That's more marketable. That's what I want. And that's where I'm at. I would want to be the next Chris Bumstead over the next Hadi Choopan, even though Hadi has the title. So that's my humble opinion. He's going to do what he wants. But if I put my life on the line, I want max results, max benefits. And it's never enough because I'm an athlete. It's never enough. That's got to sustain my life. So that's why these quarterbacks, they hold out in football. They get $100 million contract, and they're arguing because they want $125 million. It's not about the money. It's about the sacrifice. So if Chris comes to understand, if he hears nothing else, you don't compete for the money. You compete for the glory. So where's the glory? The glory is being 17th Mr. Olympia, joining Arnold, joining Franco, joining the next classic physique title to Chris's repertoire is not going to be that impressive because we expect him to win. So now you have five classic physique titles that we all expected you to win. You go win that one Mr. Olympia title. You change the course of history. You become the only person to be an Olympian in 2 different divisions. And you get the fat check, which is just a byproduct of your work, but the global recognition of what you've done, and it's never been done in history, is more important than that $400,000 check. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I want to see history.
Yes, I understand your passion, and bodybuilders have a different brain in how they think about this. I saw an interview about Jay Cutler talking about he would actually shave years off his life for those titles. And I was like, wow, okay, so this goes deep as far as like that, winning that and having that title.
Well, yeah, athletes are a different breed. I mean, when we get singularly focused on trying to accomplish the goal and finish the race, we don't think about tomorrow. Mike Tyson they said to Mike Tyson, how did you go through $300 million? And Mike said, I never expected to be 40 years old. I never expected to be here. He's 58 years old now. He's got 6 or 7 or 8 kids. He's amassed a small fortune once again in his second coming through the ventures that he's in. But he's a lesson in perseverance, because Mike's lost the last 5 years of Mike's career, maybe the last 10 years of his career. He lost more fights than he actually won. But we remember the 3 years he was great. 1986, 1987, 1988, 1989, and things started going downhill for Mike in 1990. Yeah. Mike peaked in his 20s, the first 4 years of his career, from literally 15, 16 years old to the time he was 20 years old and became the champion. He created more careers from what he did in that small window of time and resurrected his life because of who he once was. Jay Cutler's right in saying, I put it all on the line because he's not Jay Cutler unless he puts it all on the line. He's not living the life that he has unless he threw caution to the wind and sacrificed in the belief that being Mr. Olympia was the only thing. And so for Chris to say it's not about the money, I'm hoping down the road when he is my age and he does have grandchildren like I do, that he doesn't say I coulda, woulda, shoulda, because that money coulda, woulda changed the lifestyle or the life plan.
Yeah. So I have a question about this, because this goes into what I was going to ask you about the money side of it, because there are broke bodybuilders. Like, this is a problem with trying to do this sport, is you have to have money to afford this sport, I think. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not a female in this sport. It's more expensive for a female.
Yeah.
When you look at the investment in trying to get on that Olympia stage, the men are eating 5-6 times a day. Some of them are paying for their coaching. Some of them are paying for their meal prep. They're all paying for their tanning services. But when it comes down to it, they're paying $50 for a posing trunk. And then you got a woman on the other side. They're paying for their hair, their makeup. They're paying for their tanning. They're paying for their $800 to $1,000 bikini, 2-piece bikini, which, I just don't know how the bikini becomes a part of winning and losing. It's a physique show. So when you pay for that $800 bikini, and you're competing several times a year, and you don't want to wear the same one over and over again, the women are investing more money in getting on that stage.
win in the top 5, so you get no money, you
And then
know.
you have to pay you got to pay your coach. You sometimes hire someone to teach you how to walk in heels. It becomes, you might be a mother and you've got child care. It can be a very expensive thing, but this is the reason why it's not for everyone. I imagine acting is very expensive when you pay for your headshots and your acting coach, and you have to go on all of these auditions, and you've got to travel to these auditions, and you've got to pay for your agent, and you're going broke trying to become an actor, waiting for the one gig. It's life. You can go to school, medical school, and you can fail the medical exam and not become a doctor. You can put all your savings in law school and you can't get past the bar. So these are decisions that we make as individuals. You can put as many hours in the gym as you want to, and you will never be the next Shawn Ray. I was 3 years out of high school and I was a professional bodybuilder. It doesn't happen these days as much with that frequency. I don't want to call it luck, but this is a sport of subjective opinion. And when it comes to the cost, if you want to do this, you find a way. And then you start remembering as you get older, like I am, how much it cost and how much I sacrificed, how many parties I missed, how many birthdays I missed, how many fun things and memorable things I had to say no to. That for me, that was my investment. It all cost money. So just because it's not tangible money, I was trying to be compensated for all the things I had to sacrifice. So when I talk about Chris Bumstead and I say, listen, it may not be about the money today, but 20, 30 years from now, you'll think about the money. I do those. I take that all into consideration. So I want max payout. That's why I did the Olympia. It was the max payout. I wanted to be recognized as the best in the world. That's why I competed in the Olympia, because if I beat Flex Wheeler and I beat Chris Cormier and I beat Kevin Levrone, I'm one of the best in the world. If I win the Mr. San Francisco, I'm just the guy that won the San Francisco show. So for me, the psychology of looking at this on the long term is very important. Not anyone can lift weights. Anyone can eat 6 times a day. Not everybody can sacrifice their life and put it on hold to become one of the best in the world. And when you get there, like the Heisman Trophy winner, like the MVP of the football league, you want to get that pot of gold. You want to be compensated for it. So I want max dollars, not just dollars. I want max dollars because I'm the best. I'm one of the best. What does that look like? And where do I go? Where do I go to get it? So that's why I've always been a business-minded individual. It's never, you can't pay me enough. So what I do is I figure out when I do a seminar, when I do a guest appearance, when I do motivational speaking, or if I'm doing master stuff, I figure out what that time for me looks like, and I put an evaluation on it and come to an agreement. They're willing to pay me X number of dollars to travel this far, to give up 3 days of my life, to miss out on my family, my friends, and perform a performance. We come to a mutual agreement on what that looks like. It's called the art of the deal. And every athlete has a different price. Chris may say, hey, it's not worth the money because I have $1 million sponsor, but he could make it $2 million. He wins the Mr. Olympia, he could be making $3 million. And guess what? If that's what the market bears, then that's what he deserves. If he feels like he's getting the compensation that his work and his output is worth, then hey, everyone has a different price. Everyone has a different price. You get $100 million contract for a quarterback, and your agent says, hey man, I can get you $150 million. You think the quarterback is going to say, no, don't 100 million's fine? No, go get what you can. So I encourage every athlete to find a way to monetize their career, monetize their product, marketing their brand, take control of who you are, get max dollars, because life can, the career bodybuilding is this small. Life is long, and injuries happen, and babies happen, and partnerships happen, and opportunities happen. And you got to find a way to pay that forward. And all of that involves money. So for me, it's all about the money.
That's really interesting. And as you said, the business of bodybuilding is just absolutely got to be at the forefront when you're going into this sport, because it is different than any of the other sports in the way that it operates and the criteria and all these different types of things because of the subjectiveness. But I think you've offered some really helpful advice today for those who might be listening and want to learn more about the business side of bodybuilding.
Yeah, and it has to be passionate. You know, nobody ever had to call me to get me up to go to the gym.
Mhm.
No one had to force feed me. No one had to encourage me to practice my posing. No one had to tell me, "Hey, Shawn, you're still a product. Pick up the phone, send out the emails,
Yeah.
make the calls, make the connections." These are all intertwined with, you know, being passionate about the sport of bodybuilding. Some of the things I do, I don't directly benefit from. Listen, there's a best poser award that exists because I brought that back. I helped monetize that. You know, I don't want to take credit for the 212 division, but if it weren't for me, the 202 division would have never existed, which would have never given birth to the 212 had I not promoted that in 2007 in New York, which David Henry won. There are a lot of things I'm very proud of. Creating the best poser award is one of them. Adding a third division in Hawaii on the pro side is one of them. I mean, I'm only a product of my environment. We all are, but I can't compete anymore to make change. So I'm constantly trying to give back to the athletes, share my wisdom, promote my shows, represent the companies and products and brands that I do to the fullest, and continue to let my voice be heard, whether you like it or not, because this is all an assembly line of Joe Weider, Ben Weider, Steve Bleckman, Robert Kennedy, John Balick, all the people that I come to grow to admire, John Brown, Peter McGough. What comes out of my mouth comes from those sources. And those are the founding fathers of our industry that I learned from. So Shawn always says he has a PhD in bodybuilding. I do. I have a master's degree in bodybuilding. I learned from the best firsthand. And now working with and for Jake Wood, I'm able to continue that. I'm able to continue with my own social media platform. I'm continually motivating people, and I get my kicks and my thrills off of inspiring. You know, God bless me with 3 daughters. I don't even have a son. I got 3 girls, you know, so I'm seeing another side of the women's empowerment movement, women's inclusion movement, and just the women's sensitivity. Look, I'm all testosterone here. So having 3 daughters is an eye-opening revelation that I'm acutely aware of, you know, equality and equal rights for the women. So I'm all in when it comes down to the women leading the charge in the fitness industry.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're getting here toward the end. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with regards to the business of bodybuilding?
Well, again, you are the company you keep. I chose to stand around and be around people that were smarter than me my whole life. And at the same time, I'm always looking out for that one guy that reminds me of myself when I met Chris Dickerson back in 1983. That's saying, you know, hey, can I work in with you? And that little working in with Chris Dickerson led to some mentorship that I could have never gotten. He was a Mr. Olympia champion. We became friends. He passed away a year ago, but we were friends from that long, from 1983 all the way until he passed away. You never know who that next talent is going to be. So I make sure that I recognize those people the same way when I say I recognize the janitors of the world and I represent the janitors of the world. It's a constant reminder of where I come from, and it's a constant reminder of my dad. So when people see me and I hear the haters, oh, you didn't talk to me. I wanted to shake his hand. He was in the bathroom and he was packing up his pictures, and he's an asshole because he would. Well, you know what? There's a time and a place, but I've always taken time to recognize where people are, what people are trying to do. And if it's anything remotely involved in my universe, I try to give back. I try to motivate and inspire, because that was the only reason I was able to do this. John Brown and Chris Dickerson took a moment out to recognize my existence, and that existence turned into all that I am today.
Well, I want to thank you, Shawn, because I just met you and I am just a small time YouTube channel. And I appreciate that you recognize that in me and, came on my channel today. I super appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, yes. And if you guys like this video, be sure to leave a comment down below. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe and hit the bell to be alerted to when the next video drops. Thanks for watching.